Welcome back to the Breast Cancer Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How was 2022 for
It
you?
was pretty great, actually. It went by so fast. I feel like the older we get, the time goes by so
does.
fast. I look back and there are so many great things that happened in 2022. And it's like we are out of seclusion of,
Oh my
being
goodness.
indoors.
Just being able to get
Yes.
out and travel. And I think you
Yes.
even went to some conferences.
I went to 4 conferences in 6 weeks. It was crazy, but just getting together with people, that always fulfills my desire of building relationships, giving and receiving love, which is so important to me. And just having people over, going over to people's homes. It
Yeah.
was just so incredibly beautiful, and just getting rid of that social isolation, which is
Yeah.
so important for happiness.
Yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
your daughter graduated.
We had a huge party in the backyard, and it was such a great time. My family was here, lots of friends were here. And, when I was diagnosed 7.5 years ago, I did not even envision being here for
Yeah.
her graduation. And so to be able to take part in the graduation, to see that big milestone, it was huge for me.
Mhm.
And how about you, Monica? How was 2022 for
2022
you?
was great. A lot of lessons learned. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm always continuing to learn about
Yeah.
myself. And I've been reading so many books. And I read a lot of self-improvement books
Yeah.
in 2022 that has really changed my perspective on life. And I just feel at a really good place of peace, even after my diagnosis. Like I just feel very calm.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for the time to be able to grow and learn. And that's what it should be, right?
Yeah.
Like every
Yeah.
year we should be
We should be growing
evolving
and learning.
Yes, exactly. So,
And how about our podcast?
oh my gosh,
It's been over 62
countries?
countries, something like
Yeah,
that. And it's been
yeah.
featured on local news. And
Yes.
it's really been great. And, when we first started out wanting to do the podcast, my goal was, okay, let's help the people locally here.
Yeah.
I never envisioned like helping people,
Right.
not just in the country, but outside the country. So that
Yeah.
has been such a great surprise, and such a great thing that's happened for us.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
speaking of local people, our guests today are local to Columbus. And we're going
Yeah.
to talk about cold capping.
Yes.
So,
Cold capping is a big deal. It's, women lose hair and they lose their identity as a process of losing hair
mhm.
for those women who need chemotherapy. And when I tell women that they have breast cancer, the first question I get asked is, am I going to lose my hair?
Right.
And that's a huge deal. And so our viewers are going to be so happy to listen to these two incredible women who've started this process of cold capping and helping others who are undergoing chemotherapy, and to help them to keep their hair.
Absolutely. Well, let's get started on the conversation.
Yeah,
All
sounds
right.
great.
Welcome to the Breast Cancer Podcast.
I am breast surgeon Dr. Deepa Halaharvi.
And I'm Monica Brooks, a cancer advocate. And we're both breast cancer survivors. We are here to tackle topics that impact our lives. Let's get started.
Good morning, everyone. Today we have two exciting guests on our podcast, Ann Hauser and Bethany Golden, and they are doing incredible things for the breast cancer community here in Columbus, Ohio. And so I know so much about you guys, and I have admired and adored what you've been doing for the patients, but I would like for you guys to introduce yourselves.
Sure. So Bethany and I have been working together for about the last almost 6 years. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in November 2016 and went through, had a lumpectomy, went through chemo in early 2017, and then radiation. And during my chemo, I used cold caps, which at the time were not something that people saw very often in infusion centers. And I used cold caps to keep my hair. After I finished chemo, I approached OhioHealth about potentially doing more to support cold cap patients. And that is how I came to know Bethany.
My name is Bethany. I own a breast cancer, or I should say cancer boutique in Columbus, Ohio, and we have a few locations. We have always done things like head coverings and wigs and post-breast surgery items like breast prosthesis, compression wear. And about 4 years ago, we started a cold cap therapy program.
Now it sounds like, Anne, you kind of like kicked this off in a way. It wasn't something that a lot of people talked about. How did you hear about cold capping, and how did you like go about doing it if it wasn't
Right.
something familiar?
I have two kids, and at the time that I was diagnosed, my kids were in fourth grade and first grade. And when we told them that I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, they had three questions for me. The first was, "Are you going to die?" And I said, "Not from this." They
Yes.
said, "Does it hurt?" I said, "Not a bit." And they said, "Are you going to lose your hair?" And
Yeah.
so my MO throughout treatment was just to essentially try and keep life business as usual.
Yes.
And a big part of that was looking healthy. And I immediately, started Googling literally how to keep hair during chemo. At the time, my dad was working as a hospital administrator with OhioHealth in cancer services. And he kind of in passing said, "I think there are caps that like can help keep hair." And I started Googling, came across penguin cold caps. At the time, they're based virtually. So I reached out to a sales rep in Michigan. I leased caps from them. And, when I would go into the infusion center, most patients for sure, and a lot of the nurses even working in the infusion center would sort of like watch me wheel in this giant cooler filled with dry ice and these gel filled caps. And people became very invested in what this was and was it working. And I just felt like I had to give it a shot. My breast surgeon and my medical oncologist whom I both love and adore, were super skeptical and were sort of like, you can give it a try, but chemo normally wins. And so I said, well, what's the worst that happens? I lose my hair, which if I don't try will happen anyway. So I would estimate that I kept probably 75% of my
Oh,
hair.
wow.
And I just felt like using cold caps allowed me to immediately put chemo in my rearview mirror as soon as I was done.
That's amazing that you're able to just take that initiative and you're like doing your own trial. Like, let's see if this works. I don't know if it will. And
Yeah.
Bethany, I think you and I had talked about this. Like, what were your thoughts when like this idea of cold caps first came to you? Not the idea, but the process of possibly sourcing them for patients.
Well, I'll be honest, I was very skeptical at first. And when one of the directors of cancer services came to me and said, "Look, this is just an idea. What are your feelings on this?" I was like, I don't want to do one more thing. And honestly, I don't think it's going to work. So we honestly tried it. And I was the first to admit that, nope, this works. I was wrong. When I went into it, I thought, let's try it. Let's give it our best go at it. And this person, if I have any control over it, this person isn't going to lose their hair on my watch. So we followed all the rules. And I think coupled with the training that we were given from the initial company, the support that we give the patients, and the ongoing education that we have during the entire process, I think all of those things together have this great result at the end where the patients are able to keep the majority of their hair. Now, granted, we have to give very realistic expectations up front and say, this is what you have to do. This is the result that you will see. You will see some shedding, and everybody's, gauge of success is very different. But if you can end chemotherapy and other people, at the grocery store cannot tell, I think that's a success. Does your hair look different? Maybe. Were you able to color and blow dry or flat iron your hair during your chemotherapy process? No. But at the end of the day, you have hair and you can hit the ground running on the other side and go to your PTO meeting with your kids and nobody ever knows the difference.
The thing that I always say is, I think a lot of times when you first hear about cold caps, I think the initial assumption is that it has to do with vanity, when in fact, it is kind of the furthest thing from vanity. For me, it's all about dignity and self-respect and self-preservation. And, like Bethany said, being able to go to the grocery store and not have people look at you with sick cancer highs, like
Yes.
bless her heart.
Yeah.
And go out to dinner with your family and, you ultimately are able to control who knows about your diagnosis and who doesn't, because you don't have sort of that outward sign that like, I'm going through chemo.
Yeah.
Mhm. And tell me more about what you mean by self-respect. How did that play a part in, you said dignity, which is amazing, but talk about self-respect. What did that mean to you?
So for me, the thing that I always tell people is if you look like a healthy person, you will be treated like a healthy person. If you are treated like a healthy person, you will act like a healthy person. And so I think that just plays into, a patient's overall healing and sense of well-being.
That is huge. And that's really huge. Your mind is so important in healing aspect as you're going through therapy. Your mind is important all the time anyway. But when you're diagnosed with an illness, it's so important for your mind to think you're healing. You look great, you feel good. And it's so important for your mind to see that. And it's not going to see that if you see yourself in the mirror with no hair. So because that's the first thing you see, right? You see, look at yourself.
And when
And
you look in
so,
the mirror, you can look at yourself and say, I'm okay. I'm okay. Versus, ugh, things are not going well. It's easy to feel that way. Even in the best of times, when you're going through treatment, it's easy to feel that way. So, I think being able to look in the mirror and look, have some semblance of normalcy, I think is so important.
I think that was one of the hardest things for me when I lost my hair was looking at myself in the mirror because I knew I was sick and I looked it. It was so hard to learn how to love myself and to feel like I was still beautiful when I really didn't. In my opinion, I didn't look beautiful anymore.
Yes,
So,
and that is the feeling that I have to imagine is persistent even after finishing chemo. So even after you finish chemo and start to feel physically, like some semblance of yourself, when you look in the mirror, it can take years for your appearance to sort of be restored.
Right.
And so,
Right.
That's why I say using cold caps allowed chemo to be in my rearview mirror the day I finished chemo.
now, Bethany, you mentioned that you didn't think this was going to work. Was it the cold capping wasn't going to work to keep hair, or the whole process of taking this on wasn't going to work?
Probably the whole thing. I think a lot of it is based on education. So when we started talking about this 7 years ago, there wasn't the knowledge about cold capping at all. And, you would hear a little bit here and there that somebody tried it, it didn't work, they still lost their hair, or there were some, implications before, like, should we even be doing this? Would it allow the chemotherapy to get into all of the cells? What if somebody has a cell that's in none of that? We proved all of that wrong. So it does work. There's no safety implications whatsoever. And we have just made a program that we have found that works really, really well. Now, that being said, I will say that along with setting those realistic expectations, cold capping isn't for everyone, because if cold capping is going to release some stress for you in this process, it absolutely can be for you. If you think the work that is involved, and there is a lot of work involved, if you think that will give you more stress, then it's not for you. What we're trying to do is create that normalcy that Anne was talking about so that you can continue to live your life during a period of time that you're not in control. This does give you some control. And so we help those patients determine what route is best for them, for sure.
And so you've probably had to level set those expectations depending on what their goal is with cold capping and to say this may not be the right fit for you.
Exactly. If I can see a patient, if talking about this process about having a support person and changing a cap every 25 minutes and keeping your scalp at a negative 30 degrees Celsius temperature for about 8 hours during your infusion day, if that is creating anxiety and stress, then we start to talk about, well, here's another option for you, or, what would be best to relieve that anxiety. I mean, let's be honest, nobody wants to need any of these things, whether it's cold capping, chemotherapy, a wig, what have you. And so what we're trying to do is just find the best result for the patient.
Now, Anne, back when you did the cold capping, and I guess this is a question for both of you, how much has the process changed? Because Bethany, you talked about it being a lot of work. I have learned that since my diagnosis, like this is a lot. Like this requires dedication. Like you have to be willing to do it. Has that process changed from Anne when you started to what it is now?
So I'll say this, and Bethany, jump in here at any point. It's definitely an emerging field of work for sure. At the point that I cold capped, there were two basic, I'll say, modalities for cold capping. There are the sets of gel-filled caps that we use through over my head that get changed out at regular intervals so that you're keeping the scalp at a consistently very cold temperature. There are also actual scalp cooling systems that are certainly less work for the patient, but there are implications for, keeping a patient at the infusion center longer. They're sort of chained to that treatment chair for the duration of their treatment. When we started building out the program at OhioHealth, we spent about 2 years looking at all of the different options available and talking to the different manufacturers of both the caps and the scalp cooling systems. And we felt like we wanted to build a process and a program that would be best, first and foremost, for the patient, but then also, acknowledging sort of the business of cancer and realizing that our success was going to be limited if this was a process that was super intrusive for the infusion center or made for more work with the nurses that were already working really hard. So we spent a lot of time and effort making sure that we chose something that was going to be successful for the patient, but then also supported by the med staff. Now, I would say, to your question, Monica, we're starting to see, and we're actually, starting to have conversations with other companies that are sort of startups where you have, maybe a portable machine. So, a sort of a marriage of the caps and the system, the scalp cooling machine, so that a patient doesn't necessarily maybe have to work as hard changing out the caps, but can also then continue scalp cooling after their infusion is over, and they can do it from the comfort of their home and their couch.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
That's amazing. And it makes me think, like, 20 years from now, are we going to say, do you remember when we used to have to like change these out and keep, look at all that work and how easy it is now. So this is going to be evolving over the next few years, I would imagine, and continue to evolve to make it easier for the patient.
Absolutely.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
And when I was going through treatment and people were trying to understand sort of the basic science of what this is, I mean, the basic science is you are cooling the scalp to a point that the hair follicles are restricted and the chemotherapy agents aren't able to reach those tiny hair follicles. And anecdotally, the infusion center nurses would tell stories of how for years there have been like wives' tales about, if I keep a bag of frozen peas on my head,
Wow.
this may help. And similarly, for neuropathy with their hands and their feet, keeping bags of frozen vegetables, anywhere that they're trying to prevent nerve damage.
And so going back to the medical side of it with chemotherapy, to better understand, chemotherapy attacks the rapidly dividing cancer cells, to which our hair also has those
Your hair is rapidly
dividing, and that's why we lose our hair.
Yeah.
Bethany, can you talk about the process today as it is and what someone would expect if they say, yes, this is something I want to do?
Sure. So at Over My Head, we do it a little differently than if a patient was all on their own and they didn't have a cancer center that provides a service like this. We rent all of the equipment that they need, or give, I should say, all of the equipment that they need each and every infusion time. So when the patient is ready for their infusion on that day, they swing by the boutique and they pick up this pre-made kit that includes the caps, the frozen bands, the dry ice, the cooler, and all of the accessories, such as a thermometer to take the temperature of the caps, the little skin protection. Right now we use little panty liners cut into different shapes because it's the perfect shape to cover the ear and the hairline, and it stays in place because of the sticky side, and it's just thick enough to protect the skin while also providing an even cooling consistency on your scalp, because you don't want it too thick and then your hairline then wouldn't get that same cooling consistency. So we provide everything every single time, and then they just pull their kit up to the infusion center and they continue along with their day. They then take the kit home, and for an allotted time after their infusion ends, and it does depend on the chemotherapy regimen, anywhere between 3 and 7 hours after their infusion is over, they continue cold capping to achieve the half-life after the chemotherapy is over, so that they have a better chance of saving as much hair as possible.
So they're
So it can-
spending that much time, their scalp, their head is going to be at a negative 30 degrees for that long during that day, for up to
Yes.
7 hours. Was that correct?
So it's an hour prior to their chemotherapy beginning. So it's during the time that they're accessing their port or starting an IV, doing their pre-meds. And that 50 minutes lines up pretty well with all of the things that the nurse has to do prior to their infusion beginning. Then they do their infusion. And so they are changing their caps every 25 minutes during this whole time. Then as soon as their infusion is over, that's when the clock begins for their post-cooling. And their post-cooling can be anywhere between 3 and 7 hours, depending on their regimen.
So this again takes a lot of dedication
A
to be
lot
able
of
to stick
time,
to
a lot.
this.
Yes, yes.
Do you know, I'm just curious how many patients like go through it all, or do some give up? Like, this is just too much. I just wonder if there's anything like the success rate of people who have done every single chemo. Cause I imagine some people are like, whoa, I didn't really, realize, or maybe they didn't have a friend to come with them to chemo and they weren't able to change it out. Like, do things come up to where they just can't finish?
A few different things. So we have learned, and they've been changing chemotherapy regimens. Obviously, they do it all the time, and there are new regimens. In fact, I think last October they started the new regimen for triple negative breast cancer, where they do the AC at the end instead of the beginning, and they add, Keytruda to
pembrolizumab or Keytruda, correct?
So that we did not know anything about. So when we first started with a cold capping patient, we said, yeah, absolutely, let's try it. Let's give it a go. Just to let you know, we have no education on how this works with that regimen. So we gave it a go. And during the first 12 regimens, it works really well. Once they hit the AC at the end, it really takes the hair, at least from what we've seen so far. And so, yes, there have been a few people that have decided to give it up because, again, it's such a commitment. If you've then lost your hair, a few patients have decided to not finish doing the cold capping. But research also shows that if you do continue cold capping, even if you've lost your hair, it does help regrow hair on the backside more quickly.
Yeah,
Wow.
compliance is key. I mean, and I
Yeah.
think that's part of why Bethany has such a thorough sort of intake process with everybody that comes to see her, because it's really important to kind of manage those expectations up front, to say compliance is key. It's not like you can take a week off. You have to be committed to being super gentle with your hair, no hair color, no hair dryers, no, anything that's going to stress the hair, you have to avoid.
Bethany, did you mention brushing also? Like, do they brush their hair more gentle? Are they more gentle with their hair when they brush it? Or I felt like there was something else you mentioned. It was a hair color, blow dryer. What was the other thing?
Definitely you can brush your hair and you want to
Okay.
keep your hair tangle free, but you also want to be really careful with it. So no, we try not to have anybody pull their hair back, because anywhere that the hair follicle is moving around or being rubbed against, they will lose their hair during, in those spaces. It sounds like a lot of do not do's, but at the end of the day, if you leave your hair there and just try not to touch it, you have a better chance of keeping more of it, for sure.
When I go to see patients who are undergoing chemotherapy, sometimes I walk into the room, even though I know that they're getting chemotherapy, I have to ask them, you're getting chemotherapy, right? Because their hair is still there. They look like how they looked when they were first diagnosed. And one of the biggest things I have noticed is when I first started working, I would hear so much about neuropathies in the fingers. And that's a very big quality of life issue. And now I don't hear that at all. In fact, I have to ask patients, do you have, tingling, numbness in your fingers? And most people don't. So there has been a huge, incredible change in the practice that I have seen because, I started practicing way before cold caps. So it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal for quality of life for patients.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with quality of life. And I think Anne mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
What about insurance? Like, I'm sure that's a big question you get asked. Is this covered by insurance, or does OhioHealth have the foundation? I feel like there was something in there like that. Is that correct?
Yes, OhioHealth does have a foundation, because cold capping, it can be really expensive. And unfortunately, insurance does not pay for it yet. However, I think it will work in that direction. It's relatively new, and not that it's just getting on the market, but I would say, between the education of the patients and physicians, I think it will grow. What the problem is right now is cold capping doesn't have a CPT code for billing purposes. And when I started my business 16 years ago, neither did wigs. But since I've been doing this, there is a CPT code for wigs. More insurance companies are covering them. So I'm sure we'll work in the right direction, but that's part of it. So through OhioHealth, because we wanted this program to succeed, we do support each patient in the cost 75% for each patient.
Yeah, I was part of one of the fundraisers, and they, were able to raise a lot of money. And so many people are so grateful for all you guys' efforts, because their patients who come from lower socioeconomic background cannot afford it. But thanks to you guys and all the hard work that you have done, that's now available to all these patients. So my heart just gets so happy to see and hear people like you who are making such a huge difference in this world. So,
well, we always say, no one should get to keep their hair just because they can afford to. It should be something that's accessible and available to everyone. So the work we've been doing, has helped to hopefully defray a big chunk of that cost for patients. And to Bethany's point, for people that are through, OhioHealth patients have access to funds through the OhioHealth Foundation. If you're not an OhioHealth patient, I would say the Rapunzel Project website is a great resource. They have a lot of information about, there's rumors of reimbursement, for insurance, or, reimbursement in lieu of a wig through insurance. That's a great resource. I send people there a lot when they're being treated through other health systems.
Is that Rapunzel? What's it? Rapunzel Project?
Rapunzel Project.
Is that for Columbus, or can other listeners?
It's a national,
national
nonprofit. Yeah, the women that started it, I believe, were based out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And we actually consulted with them quite a bit when we were starting our program, and they've been very supportive of the work that they do. Is, aside from being a fantastic resource with information about technologies available and insurance information and where you can find caps in your local area, they also will cover the cost of biomedical freezers. So the caps that we use have to be kept or frozen at very cold temperatures. And so their nonprofit covers the cost of the freezer, but we just have to pay the shipping costs.
Dr. Hala-Harvey and I recently were looking at our podcast statistics, and we're in over 60 countries now, which is amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I wonder for our listeners, Anne, you mentioned how you kind of did your own research and you were able to rent one. Do you know if this is something that is still available for people to rent? Or I guess Bethany's nodding yes. Does that sound correct?
So Penguin Cold Caps is actually out of the UK. So they're an international company, and you can go to their website and order the products to be shipped to you directly. And then it gives you your own personalized schedule of use, meaning the timing and the temperatures that you would need. They have an online intake form. So based on lots of different variables, it will spit out your own instructions and protocol. And they ship you the entire kit directly. And then the patient would have to find dry ice to then cool the caps and rotate them through the cooler, but you certainly can do it on your own if you're not in a hospital system that provides a service like this.
When we started looking into this, cold capping has been around for decades, actually, and is something that's much more prevalent in Europe.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
So what's next for Cold Capping and Over My Head Boutique?
So we just finished a retrospective clinical study that we will be able to share the finalized results here in some publication that we're still looking at. So that's super duper exciting. Our success rates that we are finding are higher than anything that's previously been published. We're excited about that.
It gives me chills when you talk.
Yes, that's so exciting.
Yeah. You're making a huge difference in this world. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much. It's just really exciting because again, like I said, 6 years ago, I was like, fine, let's try this.
Yeah.
And very begrudgingly, I would say, right, Anne? And then we loved it, and it really works. And it's just another great option for the patients as they, go through this process.
And I think our challenge as we move forward is going to be figuring out how we continue to grow this program. I mean, the way the program exists right now is entirely because of the really hard work that Bethany and her staff do in helping to support patients. So as we look to grow the program and serve more patients in more locations, our challenge is going to be figuring out, how we continue to do that in a way that's scalable, in a way that's affordable for patients. This is an area that I think will continue to see the cost come down because it's so new. And then, figuring out how we get the word out, because I think that, I'm 6 years out of treatment, and every day I still talk to people that are like, you can do this? This is a thing?
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit of a chicken or egg challenge for us, because we are so excited and we would love to shout from the rooftops that we have this mechanism available to patients, but we're almost like, but we need to make sure we can take care of everybody.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to make a donation to go towards cold capping, how would they go about doing that?
They would do it through the OhioHealth Foundation. They could do it online, or they could reach out to the foundation directly, and they can specify that the funds go towards the cold cap therapy program.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So they know they have to specify that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover? This has been so helpful.
This is wonderful.
And just the work that you both are doing and trying to spread the word, and just, having that idea, like, what else can we do to get this started once you started the cold capping? And Bethany, for you, even though it was reluctant at first to really say, like, you know what, this can make a difference. And this is something that we can do. It's always hard to take on more work, like nobody really wants to take on more work, but when you realize the impact and the empowerment it gives women, like, nothing beats that. Like nothing beats that at all.
Oh, 100%. And, I kind of, to draw a parallel with this podcast, because I have to tell you guys, I wish, where were you 6 years ago? Like, the information that you're giving, people is so great. And, I would imagine that, kind of similar to my work with cold caps, it helps to give your own diagnosis purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's where we take our power back from what cancer took from us is, we feel like, you know what, let's do something with the knowledge that we have and make the world a better place, and to help these patients who I felt helpless when I was first diagnosed. Like, I didn't know where to turn, what to do. But, we all have a choice when we're diagnosed and how we want to use the rest of our lives. And for all of us here, it's, I know, Bethany, you're not a cancer survivor, correct?
No.
Yeah. But we're still being able to make an impact on other people. And I just think nothing's better than that. Like, it's a part of our legacy, which we talk about as well.
Absolutely.
And you guys are true heroes. Yeah. What you guys are doing is.
Thank you for the work that you guys are doing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course. Well, that's it for me.
You.
Yes, thank you so much for your time.
I'm just tearing up thinking about how wonderful you guys are and all the change you're making in this world. So thank you.
Make sure you both go out, since you look fabulous. Don't waste that shower hair.
I think there's a brunch somewhere with my name.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you both for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you guys for having us.
Thank
thanks
you.
for having us.
Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day,
You
guys.
too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh my goodness.
That was helpful.
So good. That was so good.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, I think, okay, how can what they do here in Columbus, how can this help other people as well who aren't in Columbus and don't have access to this? And that's why it was great to find out that company in the UK. And if you want to do this on your own, you absolutely can.
And the Rapunzel project is nationwide. And so
that's true
and
too.
People can go to the website to find more information.
Yeah.
But, to going back to what Bethany and Ann did is just that one thought.
Yeah.
Let me see if it works for me. If it works for me, how I can help others.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just stop with how it helped you, but you also want to take that and help others.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they're true heroes, is because they're wanting to help everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic background.
Mm-hmm.
So if something good happens to you, how can I share it with others? And I think that speaks volumes for the kind of human beings they are.
It does. And we have so much power that's not tapped into until we get a diagnosis sometimes.
Yes.
Being able to do something like this, or Anne using her diagnosis to help other people. It's like, it does make you feel empowered when you can impact the lives of others. People we are never going to meet. People she and Bethany are never going to meet. Like, to know that you're impacting complete strangers.
Yes.
And that's enough.
That is enough.
So
that's enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast.
Thank you for joining us.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.